This story that I'm telling you is an Orkney tale from my Orkney book of what's it, but I'm not at all sure where it comes from because it has in it a magical horse called Teat Gong. Now, where the name Teat Gong comes from, I don't know, but it sounds very Mongolian or Central Asian to me. So it's possible that this story has crept across Central Asia and ended up in the Orkneys. Right. Once upon a time, there was a very wealthy farmer. He had a lot of land and he had 7 sons. And 6 of his sons were incredibly hardworking. They were all tall, strong lads. They were powerful and well built and they kept the farm going, and he had a lot of land and he was very rich. He also had some magical horses. We'll come to those in a minute. But he had one son, and this one son was the youngest son. And the youngest son seemed to be impervious to work. He spent his days lying by the fire, which actually I think is what I'd like to be doing right now. It's bloody cold outside today. So I'd rather go with Assipattle, and they called him Assipattle, which means ash raker, because he was always lying by the fire. He was often covered in sort of ash, and his beautiful blonde hair was sort of mostly grey with dust and ashes, and you couldn't really see that he had wonderful blue eyes because he spent most of his time asleep. And when he did wake up, he would tell the family stories. He would say to them, I'm a storyteller, and one day I'm going to rule over all of you, and I'm going to kill a dragon. And they all laughed at Assipattle. They kicked him when they walked past him in the morning. They almost refused to feed him, but he did manage to steal food. But they treated him with such derision. Assipattle didn't seem to care. He just lay by the fire and he said, I have a destiny. Sorry, guys, you go out and cut wood and plough the fields, but I have a destiny. Nothing you could do could move Assipattle. Until one day, a terrible and terrifying sea monster appeared. He was called a storeworm. He was the most terrifying, enormous, gigantic sea monster that any of you could ever possibly imagine. I mean, his mouth was the size of Africa. His tail reached up to the moon, and he wound himself round and round in kilometers of scaly body. He also needed an awful lot of people to eat every day to keep himself alive. But the people he preferred were virgins, of course. So wherever this storeworm went, he had to be fed, because if he wasn't fed, he would cause these terrible storms, and great tsunamis would cover the land and everyone would die. So everyone was terrified of this storeworm. Well, he arrived on the shores of this country. Of course, we will not know where this country was. And there was utter terror. So the king of that particular country decided that what he needed to do was to get rid of this enormous storeworm. And so he would send a decree out to all the brave knights in armor, and he would give them great wealth if they killed the storeworm. So 10 knights arrived in his palace, and he took them down and he showed them the storeworm, and their horses were so terrified they bolted off, and the knights followed them. So that didn't work. So then he sent another declaration out to say that he would feast these knights on whatever they wanted, and he would entertain them, and they would be given half his kingdom. Because right now the situation was getting pretty awful. They had to feed this storeworm 7 virgins every day. They were running out of virgins. It was serious. So the next lot of knights arrived. There were 10 of them. They arrived on their horses. They ate and drank, and they had a wonderful time, and they were promised all this gold and half the kingdom and blah, blah, blah. And then they went down to the shore and they were shown this store warm, and they fled. Well, so would you. I mean, this creature was a monster. So the king, in his desperation and the thought of losing any more virgins to this ghastly monster, he decided he would now fight the store warm himself. He was going to go down and do it. Well, Assipattle's sitting in the farmhouse and he hears all the news about this. And he folds his arm and he thinks, okay. And he says to his family, it's my destiny, you know, I'm going to kill the store warm. Well, they looked at him and said, honest to God, you couldn't even stand up. You know, you'd been spent most of your life lying down by the fire. But he raised himself to his gorgeous 6 foot, and he really was rather gorgeous. And he did have wonderful blonde hair and incredible blue eyes. And he said, oh, no, he said, I know what I'm doing. And then he said to his father, can I have one of your horses? And his father said, absolutely not. I'm not giving you one of my horses. You know, they're extraordinary animals. Oh, so Assipattle thought, right, okay. So then he went to his mother and he said to his mother, do you know about the horses? And she said, well, yes, I do sort of know. And he said, well, can you tell me a little bit about them? And she said, oh, well, I don't know that much. But she said, I do know that your father has a special way of communicating with the horses. I think he pats them on the shoulder and they go forward, and then he has a throttle, which he blows and the horse goes incredibly fast. But I don't know where he keeps it. But that's all I can tell you. Well, Assipattle's really rather intelligent. So he goes through his father's pockets of his jacket when his father was fast asleep, and he finds the throttle, little tube. He's got the throttle. And then he goes to the stable and he gets Teat Gong. And Teat Gong means fast wind. And he jumps onto the back of Teat Gong and he slaps him on the shoulder, and Teat Gong goes into a canter. Well, the father hears the horse being taken out of the stable, and he immediately leaps up and he runs out to the stable and he sees his son cantering away on Teat Gong. So he gets onto one of his other horses, but Assipattle has the throttle and he blows on it. Well, the horse goes into super space. Gone. And the horse takes him all the way round to where the store warm is lying off the shore, waiting to eat his next 7 virgins or be killed by the king. Oh, for God's sake. So Assipattle gets off his wonderful horse, Teat Gong, and down by the shore there is a little hut, a little dwelling. And in that dwelling is an old lady. And he opens the door of the dwelling, and the old lady is fast asleep on her little box bed. And there's a small fire of peat smouldering away. And he goes up to the peat fire and he keeps an eye on the little old lady, and he creeps up to the peat fire and he gets a bowl, one of the cauldrons, and he scoops up into this cauldron some of the peats, the glowing peats, and he puts them in the cauldron. And then he creeps out of the house and closes the door. Then he goes down to the shore, because he knows that the next day the king is going to come down and apparently kill this store warm. So he goes down to the shore, and sure enough, there is the king's boat waiting for the king to make this incredible gesture, to jump into this boat and go and do battle with this store warm. But there is someone guarding the boat. Now Assipattle needs that boat. So he goes up to the guard and he says, you a bit cold? And the guard said, yeah, well, it is a bit cold. He said, well, I've got a fire here. Do you want to warm yourself in a fire? No, he said, I can't leave the boat. You know, it's really important I stay by the boat. Sorry. Oh, okay. So Assipattle walks a little bit away from him and he starts digging. He starts digging a hole in the sand. Dig, dig, dig. And the guy's sort of watching him like this and thinking, what's he up to? And Assipattle keeps digging. And then Assipattle suddenly says, gold! Oh my God, gold! I found gold! Oh, this is amazing! And as soon as he says that, the guard looks up and he runs over to where Assipattle is. And Assipattle runs over to where the boat is, jumps in the boat and pushes it off. Nicely tricked. And so he sails towards the monster, who at this present moment in time is fast asleep, his head resting like a massive mountain on the sea. And as he sees this little boat coming towards him, he opens his enormous mouth. I mean, just the biggest mouth you've ever seen in your whole life, the size of Everest. And he blows, and this huge wave starts, this huge tsunami, and the tsunami picks up the little boat. And the next thing you know is the little boat has vanished into the mouth of this enormous monster. Plop, straight into the mouth. And Assipattle's, yeah, it's going well. Travels down the esophagus in his little boat. He gets a little bit further and he gets into the stomach. Oh, this is looking good, chaps. And then he goes a little bit further and he sees the liver. Now, what you don't know about monsters is, and you'll probably never visit one, but I can assure you that you can see inside a monster because they have these scales which sort of, well, they're luminous. So they give the light through. So it was sort of pinky glow in there. Sort of rather nice, sort of a warm, sort of reddish pinky glow. So he could see exactly what was going on. So he got to the liver. So what he did with his liver is he drew his knife out of his pocket, out of his belt, which he very carefully kept. And he cut a slice into this massive, was a massive liver. Okay, it was a big liver, big mouth, big monster, large liver. And into this hole that he'd cut in the liver, he pours and throws the peats, the glowing peats. Woof. And then he quickly gets back in the boat and turns the boat round and gets ready to leave. And he starts paddling uphill because it's bound to be uphill, isn't it, from the liver to the esophagus. Well, you see, the liver's got a lot of oil in it, awful lot of oil. And what does oil like doing? Burning, burning. And so the monster's kind of got this sort of, got a bit of indigestion, you know, it's a bit like having, it's got a bit, it feels like it's got gallstones or something. There's something going on in his liver and it's, and so the monster starts to sort of writhe a bit and he's sort of moving about in the sea and there's all these waves and then he opens his mouth because he's gonna burp. And this massive burp comes up and out shoots Assipattle in his boat. And the wave pushes him onto the shore at the feet of the king, who is extremely angry that somebody has stolen his boat. Assipattle steps out of the boat and he says to the king, there you go, watch this. Whoa, the monster's in the sea and it's just got this horrible pain in his chest and it's just getting worse and worse. There's a fire down there. Oh my God. And as they all stand on the shore, because people are now gathering, the monster sort of explodes. Absolutely explodes into the heavens. There's just this enormous rumble and crunch, and then this monster just disintegrates. And you know, it's really interesting because his front teeth blew out and they landed in the sea and became the Orkneys. And his back teeth came flying out of his mouth and they landed in the sea and became the Shetlands. And then the rest of his body sort of exploded and went in a very odd direction became the very lumpy Faroes Islands. With sort of the scales on his back and the bits of them, and they've sort of all lumped. Those are the Faroes. Oh, and you can recognize it, of course, if you go and visit the Faroes. You can see that it's definitely the back of a monster. And today, to this very day, if you go to Iceland, you will know that Iceland has a volcano, the only volcano. And that volcano is what's left of the liver, and it's still burning. And Assipattle was given the kingdom by the king, and he did marry the king's daughter, who was the last virgin left, which was why the king was in such a panic, because he didn't want to feed his daughter to the monster. And he was so grateful to Assipattle that he presented the princess to Assipattle, and they magically fell in love. Because of course, Assipattle was very handsome. He had beautiful blonde hair. He was sort of a Viking. And he had blue eyes, and he was quite gorgeous, and he was very tall. And now he was the ruler of the land. Thank you.